Hi guys, this is gsn.com and I'm here with the Honor 70 for a review. We're dealing here with a mid-range phone, where I would rather say high mid-range, unveiled at IFA 2022 in Europe, and which comes with a pretty special sensor. We've seen 64 megapixel camera before, also 50 megapixel, but this is the first time I'm seeing a 54 megapixel back camera. At the same time, it's a very light and slim phone, which is very good looking. It may appeal to the younger audience. In spite of being a former branch of Huawei, we do get the Play Store here and the Google services, and a powerful Snapdragon 770G Plus CPU inside. Also fast charging and a 32 megapixel selfie camera. Okay, so I think it's time to get started with the review. Just so you know, the price tag should be around $600 for this handset. The back side, if you look at it closely, it actually reminds me of the Huawei P50 Pro or also the Huawei P50 Pocket with the scales. I would like to call them diamond scales texture, the backside pattern, and also the shape of the figure eight camera at the backside. Once again, incredibly slim and light phone, 7.9 millimeters, 178 grams, one of the lightest phones I've seen this year, for a 6.67 inch diagonal. I would also mention that the front panel is curved, the back panel is curved, and that the device is quite slippery, actually too slippery for my own taste. It also has narrow bezels, a solid build, and the approach at the backside is a dual texture actually. These are scales, and here we have a sort of sand at the bottom part, not sure if you can notice it. Anyway, the device has frosted glass at the back side, glass at the front as well, and my guess that we have metal or plastic frame between them, but it's also a very slim one. The colors include midnight black, emerald green, Icelandic frost, and crystal silver. An elegant phone for sure, but not sure how comfy it becomes once it gets slippery and you're not used to such a slim format. Now, the screen I keep playing with here is definitely a quality one. It's of the OLED variety, 6.67 inches, narrow bezels, Full HD Plus resolution, 120Hz refresh rate for gamers, HDR10 Plus support, and 10-bit colors. We also have symmetrical bezels and a small punch hole. Now let's check out a video and see what this screen can do. Okay, so making it pretty immersive, here we are. Oh, almost dropped it. You just saw the thing I mentioned before in action, the fact that it's quite slippery. When you're trying to grip its curved sides, you may drop it. However, I have to say that the panel is amazing. It's a quality OLED, which is bright, crisp, and vividly colored. It offers wide view angles, as you can see for yourself here. And at the same time, it has a great contrast even in full sunlight. There are deep blacks, there's a pure white, and everything checks out fine for this OLED panel. It's a quality one, it's a flagship one. It's got a pentile matrix pixel arrangement. And going further, let's see what the lux meter showed us. We achieved 614 lux units, which is actually very nice, very solid. It goes above Samsung Galaxy A53 and the Poco F4. It goes below the Vivo X60 Pro and also below the Motorola G82. If you're wondering about the settings for the screen, we can go here. We have display and brightness. We can auto switch themes. There's brightness, including an automatic one. There's color mode and temperature, including normal and vivid options. Color temperature palette, eye comfort, ebook mode, smart resolution, and refresh rate can be set to dynamic, 120 Hz or standard. That's pretty much it as far as the screen is concerned. Now we go inside the phone and try to figure out what makes it thick and what makes it so special. Okay, so I think I'm actually going to resort to this app here because it also shows you some of the details about the device. You can see it here. We're dealing here with a processor of the Qualcomm variety, Qualcomm Snapdragon 778G plus 5G, 6 nanometer, octa-core with an Adreno 642L GPU. Now, I'm pretty sure that we also have other apps here to show us more details. If not, we can get one from the Play Store. That was a pretty fast install, by the way. This is the confirmation of the CPU I mentioned before. And then we have the RAM, 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigabytes of storage. There are also versions with 8 gigs, 128 gigs of storage, or even 512 gigs. There's no microSD in case you're wondering, and I also experience zero lag when gaming on this phone or using benchmarks or doing day-to-day stuff. Also, the temperature doesn't get overboard, so that's nice. When it comes to benchmarks, we have them here. Let me start off with Antutu 9, which we have here. For a mid-range phone, it's actually not bad, just above the Xiaomi 12 Lite, above the Galaxy A52s. We're also beating the selfie phone Vivo V23. However, we're below the Motorola Edge 30 and OnePlus Nord 2T. We go further to Geekbench 5 Multicore, where we're treated to this result just above the Pixel 6 Pro, which is a bit of a compliment, also beating Huawei Nova 9 and the Moto G100. However, below the Samsung Galaxy S20 Fan Edition and the Xiaomi 12X. When it comes to the GPU, we have a lot of 3D Mark tests, and let me show you this one here, where we're beating the Huawei P50 Pocket, which is similar in design, and we're also beating more relevant stuff like the Huawei Nova 9, the Realme GT Master Edition. We do score below the Motorola Edge 20 and Edge 30 plus the Poco X3 Pro. I would say that these results achieved here and all the performance results check out for a mid-range phone with the performance of the end of the year 2021. That's the level we're at. By the way, the Honor 60 and Honor 50 had the Snapdragon 778, so pretty similar stuff, not much of an evolution here, just a plus. When it comes to the temperature, we go here. We achieve 34.7 degrees Celsius in benchmarks, and in games 34.4, making this one of the cooler phones. It remains quite cool. On the battery side of things, we have a 4800 mAh unit here capable of 66 watt charging. It's supposed to reach something like 60% in 20 minutes, and there's also a reverse charge. There's no wireless charge that I know of. The predecessor Honor 60 had a similar 4800 mAh battery, by the way. Okay, so I think it's time we saw some results here of our battery tests. So here we go. This is the video playback time. We achieved 20 hours here, which is a solid result. It's rare that we see such an exact result. It goes above the Xiaomi 11T and the Vivo V23. It stays below the OnePlus Nord 2 and the Vivo X60 Pro. We did the next PC Mark test with simulate continuous usage like web browsing, videos, gaming and such things. 13 hours and 10 minutes is an excellent result. It goes above the Oppo Reno 6 Pro and the Galaxy A52s 5G. It stays below Poco F4 and the OnePlus Nord 2T. The charge is also not bad, 48 minutes, quite solid, and after just 30 minutes you should be all set with 83% charge. Now when it comes to acoustics, I'm a bit disappointed by the fact that we have a singular speaker at the bottom here. There is no love for an audio jack and no love for stereo speakers. The earpiece is not being used. Honestly, I can barely see the slit at the top above the selfie camera. Now, the experience goes something like this. Okay, so a bunch of conclusions. We have a rather solid bass for drum and bass. I've been listening to such tunes, new Pendulum tunes by the way, Steve Aoki and Grandson and such things. Good voices, good bass, decent high notes. The volume doesn't break any record in music, that much I can say. And you will not cover the speaker when holding the phone in landscape because it's over here. I wish you would have had a stereo experience though. We have some decibel meter tests here to show you. Now when we start with the regular acoustic sample test, we achieve 80.9 decibels, which is definitely not a record and not very impressive, although it does beat the OnePlus Nord 2T and the Xiaomi 11T. Stays below Galaxy A52 5G and the Xiaomi 12X. In games, I was a bit more impressed by the 102.4 decibels achieved. It's actually a great result. Superior to the Galaxy S20 Fan Edition, Galaxy A53 and the Poco F4. Inferior to the OnePlus 10T and OnePlus Nord 2. I think we're pretty much done with the acoustics and we can actually go to the camera. You can see here in this small punch hole that we have a selfie shooter, 32 megapixel, HDR and Full HD capture are available. At the back side we have this figure 8 shaped camera module with 3 sensors and an LED flash, dual tone by the way. Now, the main camera is a 54 megapixel one with a Sony IMX800 sensor inaugurated by this phone. f1.9 aperture, and it takes 12.5 megapixel shots. Next up we have the ultra-wide 50 megapixel camera with 122 degrees and autofocus for your macro needs. And boy, do we have some macros for you. There is also the Bokeh 2 megapixel camera, and this whole ensemble captures 4K 30 frames per second videos. Now, the camera modes are, I would say, pretty generous. We have them here. We have the more section with the panorama, stickers, high-res, slow-mo, time-lapse, super macro, story, pro, HDR, documents, and solo cut. Well, this solo cut is pretty interesting. You should basically follow a person in a crowd and then single them out separately in a separate video, from what I understood. There's also the multi-video, which basically takes a video with a front and back camera. We have the video section where I can confirm for you the fact that we have up to 4K video capture. Next up we have photo with AI, which is quite snappy by the way, portrait with a bunch of bokeh and beauty filters, night mode, and aperture, which is basically bokeh number 2 but for objects. That's about it in a nutshell, and let's get to the gallery because we have quite a few photos. Over 300 of them in the daytime and in the nighttime, and these macros look stunning. Okay, so I have to show you some of these beautiful flowers captured with the cameras of the phone, and we have some stunning details of a bee. You can even see its wings and the small little hairs on its feet. This is amazing, and honestly I've tested microscope cameras and also large zoom cameras plus a few of those macro dedicated cameras, and none of them could do this. And the secret here probably pertains to an unusually solid camera which doubles as the, well, macro shooter. Possibly the ultra-wide camera is the one doing the tricks on account of having its focus abilities. Now, speaking of which, let's start things and take them one at a time. Okay, so I have to say that the color calibration is quite solid here, nothing to object. With the main camera and with the ultra-wide camera, this is one of those mid-range phones which blurs the lines between a mid-range handset and a flagship. I'm generally happy with the way the sky looks, the way the vegetation is captured in spite of the strong sun, and several other scenarios, maybe except for the zoom, which kind of fades away after 3x. But those flowers, they're definitely wallpaper worthy, most of them. Okay, so going further here, we also have a bunch of selfies. I mean, they're pretty nice and all. It's one of the better phones when it comes to the selfies. Nicely rendered hair, lots of details on the skin. You can see all the blemishes, and the eyes are pretty expressive. I wouldn't say it's got the same values as a selfie phone like the Vivo V21 or V23, and it also makes a strange highlight here for the subject. If you can see it, it's strangely contrasted and burnt. Now, aside from that, I'm happy with the selfies achieved here, but it's definitely no Huawei Nova 10 Pro. Very crisp images, that much I can say. It actually reminds me of the shock I had when I tested the OnePlus Nord 2T, which behaved like a flagship when it came to the main camera. It's in the same league as the OnePlus Nord 2T, I would say, or even higher. It fights the Motorola H30 and beats it, and it also kind of beats what I've seen posted on the internet for the Nothing phone, because they share the same CPU. Even with the sun in front, we don't have many aberrations, so, well, color me impressed. And these are some indoor shots, just so you know that it also handles indoor light quite well. So I'm happy with the colors, the details, also the way the light is handled during the daytime, and of course we have stunning macros to look at here. Those are daytime shots, and we also have some low light shots, actually 2 sets of them. This time I'm not as impressed as I was before. It was a rainy night, as you can see here, and even though the images are quite clear and detailed, I'm feeling the mid-range segment here. It doesn't exactly feel like a flagship. The ultra-wide shots have a bit more noise in them and the halos are a bit larger. The zoom is definitely underwhelming. We can totally see that here there's a lot of noise. And there's even the odd purple reflection halo around the lights. So it behaves like a mid-range, but one of the better ones. And check this out here, the same halo effect I've seen on some selfies also appears here. To be honest, I didn't exactly feel the need to use the night mode, which may feel a bit excessive when lighting up this panel here, for example. Well, that's it during the nighttime. I think it can fight something like half a dozen Xiaomi's and beat them, but on a general scale, I don't think it's a memorable nighttime behavior. Now, if we're talking about videos, we have 25s to look at, so let's get going. The good news is that stabilization is not half bad, and this is actually a video meant to showcase all the colors that we have available here, the blues, the reds, the yellows, and I would say that they're quite well represented. I've seen this video on a large TV set, and I was pretty impressed, even though the sun may bother some people. And here's the same scenario, this time with some extra walking around. Once again, solid stabilization. A bit of saturation happening for the vegetation area, but nothing exaggerated. And then we get to the actual stronger tests for the stabilization. Now, when you get in the shade, when there's no more sun, you may notice a bit of a trepidation of the image, a slight vibration, which is what I felt here. This was the first where you could actually see the top part of the image vibrating. However, I would say that 70% of the clip or 80% is very well stabilized and clear, but remember that in the shade, stabilization may pale. Okay, so another clip here where we're ascending stairs, this time with excellent stabilization, but a bit more saturation and exposure than I would have desired. And we also have a bunch of roses that we used for the sake of a focus test, which was passed, I would say, with flying colors. Now, even though I'm happy with the 4K filming and the details and the colors here, the contrast feels a bit too intense at times. That's something I felt, especially here, where we have an area with a lot of light and an area with a lot of darkness below the bridge. Okay, we also should have a selfie video or two, like this one here, more of a TikTok affair. Okay, so I'm happy with the details and also the focus. The stabilization isn't the best in the world, but it's good enough for an amateur vlogger, I feel. This has been the daytime test. Now let's see some low light clips. Well, this time we have finally found the Achilles heel. Big light halos, huge contrast differences, a pretty dark capture here, and annoying steps between the levels of zoom. This feels like a weak point of the smartphone. However, it was a pretty rainy night, and that may be a circumstance for it. As you can see, the image fluctuates from the darker areas to the brighter areas. I mean, this is what it shows its limitations for a mid-range phone. And also when walking, there's a bit of trepidation. However, the macros will always remain in my memory, taken by this handset. And the fact that we don't have a dedicated camera for that, but rather an ultra-wide one with autofocus, is mind-blowing. Okay, so now that we're done with that, I think we can discuss other things like connectivity. This handset provides you with 5G, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, NFC, GPS, and a USB-C 2.0 port at the bottom. Its calls, the calls it produced, were pretty loud and clear, and when it came to the speed test, we have a dedicated app for that. It's here, and this is what we achieved. When it comes to Wi-Fi, we achieved 856 megabits in download and 861 megabits in upload. When it comes to 5G, we were able to achieve 532 megabits in download and 43.2 megabits in upload. I would say we're doing quite fine. Now let's talk about the operating system. It's actually Android 12 with Magic UI 6.1 on top. If you've seen our review of the of the Honor Magic 4 Pro, you know exactly what to expect. We have the news feed here of the leftmost feed, and we have these options: wallpaper, cards, transitions, and home screen settings to tweak the experience. Cards are actually widgets, which are quite detailed as Android 12 introduced. You can see them here looking all pretty and detailed. Even though we have all the apps on the screen, you can opt to have an app drawer. Swipe down for notifications and quick settings. They're still united, they're not separated like on Xiaomi and on iOS. For security, we have the face unlock, which I'm using right now, but we can also rely on the fingerprint scanner embedded in the screen. It's an optical one and it does its job quite well. If you look closely at the iconography of the interface, it's clearly resembling the Huawei one, and I've talked to the people of Honor. They said that products are usually in development 2 or 3 years ahead, and they weren't separated from Huawei when they started developing this product, so yes, the interface may feel a bit similar. The good news is that we do have the Play Store here available and also the Google services, unlike the Huawei phones. Now, something to remember here is the fact that you can use gestures as I'm doing right now. So if you want to do something like back, you swipe from the side. If you want to do this, you got the multitasking area, the recents, and you can also do split screen if you want to. And well, there you have it. This is the home gesture. And in the settings area, you can find useful stuff like connectivity options, home screen and wallpaper with quite a few customization options. These are the ones for the always on display, which are actually quite good looking. These are the ones for the magazine unlock, inherited from Huawei, and wallpaper plus a bunch of icons to tweak. And you can also opt to have an app drawer from here, as I mentioned before. Sounds, notifications, biometrics, battery, storage, and I'm sure there's definitely an area where you can actually add more RAM, the trendy option we're seeing nowadays quite a bit. 2 gigs of RAM with the Honor RAM Turbo are available. We have the privacy area with the privacy dashboard here, showing which apps have accessed resources over the past 24 hours, and a private space to secure your content from your work or your private stuff. Digital well-being and parental control is available as well, plus an assistant, even though I think nobody uses it. Not as famous as Siri, Bixby, Google Assistant or Alexa. Accessibility features are available as well, plus the About section where you can learn more about the handset. Okay, I think that's about it. Now we can talk about the apps. We have the Google ones available, of course, the calendar, the Honor Store, the notepad used to take notes. We also have the file section, which can identify quite a few apps, including APKs, the very useful system manager with the cleanup feature, data usage, block numbers, and virus scanning. We have email, we have a bunch of tools, ranging from weather to calculator, mirror, compass, and SIM toolkits. We have the productivity apps like TrainPal, Trip.com, and WPS Office, Netflix, Facebook, Booking.com, TikTok, and a bunch of shortcuts to games. I would say this is about it as far as this phone is concerned, and I think it's time we talked about the verdict. So as usual, verdict means pros and cons. On the pro side, one of the slimmest, lightest, and better looking phones, at least from the back side, we've seen recently. It's got a bright screen, which is satisfying color-wise. At the same time, it brings a fast CPU from the mid-range segment, which doesn't overheat and can run games. Good battery life and fast charging, also fast connectivity. A very solid main camera, actually impressive one, plus the ultra-wide is a total hit, especially on account of the macro. Fast connectivity, I think, was already mentioned. The selfies were pretty fine by me. Detailed 4K videos, OK stabilization, and a customizable user interface. Those have all been details on the Pro section. Now let's talk about the cons. On the cons, it still remains a rather slippery phone, too slim for its own good with a very slim frame. It's also very similar to a Huawei phone in interface and even in design. It's got those curved edges which may discourage some people because this area can become gray for the screen, and it's also not very comfy when you're doing some gaming. We only have one speaker on board, we don't have a stereo setup, and the one we have here is not exactly very loud. The nighttime videos and photos aren't as impressive as the daytime ones. And also we don't have IP certification, Gorilla Glass, and well, the Huawei resemblance and the interface is pretty clear. Now, when everything is said and done, this is a great phone to have if you want to take finally some ultra-wide shots which are decent from a mid-range phone. Usually, mid-range phones aren't good in ultra-wide. This one is actually so good that it also ditches a macro camera to take the best macros on the market with an ultra-wide camera. I know it's pricey. The correct price would be somewhere around or below $450 or something like that, even 400. A 500 plus or maybe even 600, it's a bit pricey. It fights two phones with the same CPU, Motorola H30 and Nothing phone, which should be cheaper. However, this one has the better camera, extra battery life, and the unique looks. That's something to remember. Its only drawback are the lack of stereo speakers, slippery, and price. Aside from that, you're getting a fabulous camera, especially if we're talking about those beautiful, beautiful macros, which I cannot get enough of. So if you're a traveler, you'll definitely appreciate the camera and the battery life. It's a phone for the travelers, but definitely wear a case around it. That's it from gsnone.com. This has been the review of the gorgeous Honor 70. Goodbye.